Imagine spending your entire life serving your country. You survive the harshest battlefields, carry scars no one can see, and finally decide it's time to build a peaceful life of your own. You find your dream home, a mansion where you can finally breathe, finally belong. But the very first night you arrive, the people in charge of that neighborhood stop you at your own gate. Not because of paperwork, not because of law, but because they simply think you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to Gregory. But what those neighbors didn't know was that Gregory had a family bigger than blood, a team forged in fire. And when they showed up, everything changed. Gregory Johnson had given his life to service. 2 decades in special operations. He had led rescue missions, guarded convoys under fire, and stood in countries most Americans couldn't even find on a map. He had buried brothers and sisters in arms, and he had lived with the guilt of surviving. When he retired, all he wanted was peace, and a place to finally call home. He found it in Texas, a sprawling mansion on a quiet street. It wasn't just big, it was beautiful. Wide lawns, tall gates, and neighbors who waved from manicured driveways. Or so it seemed. The day he signed the papers, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. After years of renting and temporary bases, this was his home, his sanctuary. But when Gregory rolled up to his new gate that night, suitcase still in the back seat, pride swelling in his chest, someone was already waiting for him. Sandra Miller, the president of the Homeowners Association. Blonde bob, ironed blouse, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She looked him over from the other side of the gate and didn't see a decorated veteran. She didn't see a man who had bled for the country. She saw one thing, a black man she didn't think belonged in her community. "Turn around," she told him coldly. "This neighborhood isn't open to just anyone." Gregory thought he misheard. He pulled out the deed, fresh ink, signed at the courthouse. "This is my home," he said firmly. But Sandra smirked, shook her head, and waved to the guards who had come with her. "Not tonight," she replied. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. By the next morning, whispers were flying faster than the wind. Who was this man? Did he really buy the mansion? Why was the HOA president saying he forged documents? And that was only the beginning. Sandra started burying Gregory under fake violations. A fine for leaving trash bins out too long, even though his bins were still empty. A warning about his grass being too tall, though he hadn't even had the chance to unpack a lawnmower. A notice about unauthorized renovations, though he hadn't touched a single brick. Every day, a new envelope. Every day, a new smear. Neighbors who once waved at him now stared. Some shook their heads, others whispered behind curtains. A few even crossed the street when they saw him coming. Gregory had spent years in combat zones where every shadow might hide an enemy, but nothing prepared him for the quiet hostility of people who were supposed to be neighbors. Still, he stayed calm. That was who he was. Calm under pressure, steady when everyone else panicked. But inside, it cut deep. He had defended his country only to be treated like a trespasser at home. Sandra wasn't satisfied with paperwork and whispers. She craved humiliation. She wanted to break him. At an HOA board meeting, she announced to a crowded room that Gregory didn't belong, waving copies of documents she claimed were in dispute. He stood silently, the deed in his hand, while neighbors looked at him like he was guilty until proven innocent. That night, sitting alone in his bare living room surrounded by unopened boxes, Gregory realized this wasn't a fight he should fight alone. He reached for his phone and made a call. Just a few words. No explanations, no begging, just one sentence. "Family, I need you." 2 nights later, the sound of tires rolled down his driveway. A black SUV pulled up, headlights cutting across the lawn. Doors opened, boots hit pavement, and 4 figures stepped out. Marcus, the towering giant with arms like steel beams. Isaac, the strategist, sharp eyes scanning every angle. Carla, the tech genius, small but deadly focused. And Damien, the joker of the squad, whose humor could cut tension sharper than any knife. They weren't just friends, they were family. Special ops family. Each of them owed Gregory their life, and none of them were about to let him fight this battle alone. From the moment they arrived, the neighborhood changed. Marcus stationed himself by the gate like a silent sentinel. Carla set up cameras and documented every petty violation Sandra tried to invent. Isaac pored through the HOA bylaws, highlighting every loophole, every clause Sandra had abused. And Damien? He worked the crowd, talking to neighbors, turning suspicion into curiosity and curiosity into support. At the next HOA meeting, Sandra expected Gregory to walk in alone, head bowed, ready to be shamed again. Instead, he walked in flanked by 4 soldiers who looked like they'd walked straight out of a war movie. The room went silent. Sandra fumbled through her notes, her voice cracking. "Mr. Johnson is in violation of—" Isaac cut her off, slamming the thick binder of HOA laws onto the table. "Wrong. Section 12. Clause B. Nothing you've fined him for is valid. In fact, what you've done is abuse of power." Carla raised her phone high. "And it's all on record. Every word, every notice, every lie neighbors murmured. Phones came out, some even started clapping." Sandra's cheeks flushed red. For the first time, she wasn't in control. But Sandra wasn't done. One last, desperate move. The very next morning, she ordered the guards to block Gregory again at the gate. "Do not let him through," she barked. "This is my community." Gregory stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "This is our community, and you don't get to decide who belongs." The guards froze. The neighbors, gathered behind their fences, began cheering. Phones recorded every second. Marcus crossed his arms. Damien smirked. Carla held her camera steady, and Isaac stood tall beside his brother. Gregory walked through the gate, his gate, with the kind of dignity Sandra could never touch. She stumbled back, words caught in her throat, as the sound of applause and cheers filled the street. In that moment, the war was over. Within days, the board voted Sandra out. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of harassment, cover-ups, and misuse of authority. She wasn't just removed, she was disgraced. The fines Gregory had been slapped with were thrown out. Neighbors who had doubted him began dropping by with handshakes, pies, even apologies. And slowly, the man who had once been treated like an outsider became the heart of the community. For Gregory, the mansion wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof. Proof that no matter how high the gate, no matter how strong the opposition, respect could be earned, dignity could be reclaimed, and justice could be won. One evening, he stood in his backyard by the grill. Marcus, Isaac, Carla, and Damien laughed around him, sharing stories with neighbors who once whispered, but now smiled openly. Gregory raised his glass. He had fought on battlefields across the world, but this fight, the fight for home, for belonging, was one he would never forget. And so, the HOA president who thought she could block him at his own gate ended up losing everything, while Gregory gained not just a house, but a community. If you think justice was served, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a good underdog victory. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, we'll tell you about the HOA that tried to auction off a veteran's ranch while he was deployed. Let's just say the Army had other plans.